back in business. Thank you.
Mayor,
Yes,
one thing, we're back on the record, maybe if you kind of briefly summarize what we've already done for John or the reporter, if they come back on, that would be helpful.
so we are back recording. We're resuming the March 19th, 2024 meeting of Medical Lake City Council. I think that the summary of what happened, we did the Pledge of Allegiance, a call to order, roll call. We added 4 items to the agenda that were just technicalities for attachments, which were approved unanimously by council. There were no citizen comments. There was 1 written comment. There are no announcement, proclamation, or special presentation. There was a public safety report by the fire department talking about continued mitigation work on the smolder that's happening underground out by Pine Lodge. And then the Fisherman's Breakfast that's coming up April 27th. Council member reports ensued. Councilmember Pritchard, if you would like to give us a brief synopsis of your report.
Geo walks on the 13th, Saturday at 1 o'clock. Well, it's STEM night on the 2nd. I went out to the underground fire because the original report said there's radioactive material in there. There's not radioactive material in there. It's been tested by Fairchild Air Force Base. We're testing for heavy metals. I'm still concerned. I forgot to bring up North Park, but I'll bring it up as a citizen at the end. I think that was it.
Okay, thank you, sir. Ms. Schaefer.
Finance committee met, reviewed claims and warrants and payroll, and everything's good.
Okay. Mr. Spears.
I did find that information. So the STA is having a, what are they calling it? It's an open house with regional transport partners, but it's people that use the bus system. So West Plains location is the Spokane County Library in Airway Heights. So just the library there in the city. It's on March 28th from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. It's specifically addressing the STA Route 61, which is the one that is Highway 2 Fairchild line with the stop at Highway 2 and Lundstrom Road. So they're talking about just the revisions and changes there. So if anybody rides that or is interested in that bus or would like to rabble rouse about anything else West Plains related, please go to that meeting. So they will be there and they will take comments. You can also go on the website at any time, either anonymously or as a named person, and give feedback about any of the routes at any time. And they actually, I have gone through the report. They read every single one of them. It is ridiculous. So, I mean, it's great.
It's really ridiculously good.
Yes, they read every single one and they do respond and they do react. So, and that's how they look at how they're changing routes. So when they're looking at service expansions or increases in services, that's the best way to get it in front of the 9 people that vote to actually make the changes, is to get it into that report.
Okay, we appreciate that. Thank you. Anything else, Mr. Spears?
No.
Okay. Councilmember Kennedy.
This last week, I attended a Spokane Regional Transportation Council meeting and listened to a fellow from Department of Transportation, gave through a list of all the highway projects that are planned over the next 5-10 years. And there's quite a bit of activity as far as DOT is concerned. North-South Freeway doesn't look like it's going to be completed anytime as quick as we would like, but it's making progress, I guess. And a bunch of other stuff happening. The Transportation Council also had some of their employees give presentations on various things, and one that caught my interest was a young fellow was talking about the governor's new plan for reduced carbon dioxide emissions from cars and whatnot, and had this big graph of how you're going to reduce CO2 from whatever the level is down to 0 in by 2050 or something like that. And it perplexed me a little bit because I asked him, I said, well, who's measuring the CO2 levels? Because I, for one, don't want the CO2 to go down to 0 because we'll be all dead. And he kind of looked at me dumbfounded. So wasn't sure. I said, well, there's got to be some measurement. So all this stuff that we're doing, does it affect our air that we breathe. Well, he didn't know whether it did that. And it just says that, but they have this thing, and then one of the other members on the council says, well, it's a calculation. I said, oh, so it's a political measurement, not a scientific measurement of what we get the CO2 down. I said, oh, okay. So I don't know that I made his day per second because he was looking perplexed during this whole thing. So why did I be asking such a thing? So,
Just wanting to breathe, sir. Just-
yes, it's wonderful. So that's it.
Thank you so much. Mr. Maxwell.
We did have a general government meeting tonight, and the main thing is just Waterfront Park is still closed. The trail has been opened at times, but now they're starting to cut down some more trees. So when it's indicated not to go on it, that means workers are out there actively doing stuff. So please don't walk on it. And
Very good. When you see the sign, obey it,
Yeah.
right? Thank you. Anything else?
Yeah.
Well, I had one question
Oh, yeah.
about that. Since I missed the meeting, I was gonna ask Sunny or Scott, whoever's in. When's the yard waste trailer? I'm collecting a pile of stuff in my yard that
Yeah.
needs to go into those trailers, so.
So the unwritten rule is the beginning of April. They'll be available. We're working with Genie as soon as they're available to get those trailers in and the weather's permitting. So if it gets wet, they prefer not to have all that clean green get in a trailer and get soggy. And so depending on weather, April 1st is when we're looking to have those available.
Probably put that on our website and the Facebook. If you want to keep a look there or give us a call. Very good. Mr. Olson.
Concerning public safety, we had a nice report from the fire department. We did not have a representative from the sheriff's department this time. There was nothing outstanding that was really that we needed to know about. Business as usual. Thank you.
Councilmember Harbolt.
We did have public safety meeting tonight, and I do think it's important for someone from the sheriff's department to be at those meetings, whether there's anything there or not.
Yes.
They have a lot more resources with personnel than the fire department does, or the fire district, but they always manage to have someone here and to answer questions if for no other reason, if the council have questions or the citizens have questions. And I think that needs to be a priority. I think we need to have a representative here just in case we have questions. If they don't have anything to report, then they can stand here and report that. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you so much. We'll reach out to the sheriff's office and find out why that was missed. So, yep, I couldn't agree more. Thank you. Couple things for my report. One, still continued work on the long-term recovery work with FEMA, state management, county emergency management, and long-term recovery group. We do have 2 sites identified, one in Medic Lake, one in Elk, of homes that are going to be built by one is Christian Public Service, the other one is the Mennonites group coming in next week. So the Christian Public Service has secured housing here and plans to be on site May 1st. We do have building materials that are paid for through donations. And then we have a partnership with Ziggy's and working on partnerships for all the other parts that it takes, like concrete and dirt works and those things to get the project started. So those should be starting to roll out May 1, and also about that same time in Elk, they're working on their housing. They have their folks coming next Tuesday, and we'll do a tour, meet with their project manager. And so it's just really good as we see all the work happening, that these are the least likely to be able to rebuild without help. And so having them getting their buildings up at the same time, I think is going to be, I feel good. So we'll probably be doing some more matching fundraising out there. So you'll see more about that in the near future. The other is just a minor thing. We had a contract with Tyler Technologies, and that was for Park and Rec services. Tyler Technologies is that IT piece that we use for utilities and other things. But anyway, it didn't work well. And so we tried to make it work well and it just didn't. So we are going to, contract has expired. We're going to give them written notice. I'll be signing that and letting them know that we're going to seek other ways. And I don't know, do you want to speak to who we're going to be working with?
We're vetting right now.
Okay. So more to come on that, but we're saying no thank you to Tyler because it was a poor system in our opinion. So anyway, I don't have anything else. Costs, I see for city administrator and city staff, I had costs is named there first on the exit conference. So you don't want to
Yeah,
speak to that?
I just want to make quick note to council that the exit conference has been scheduled for March 27th at 1 p.m. It's a virtual meeting and we're going to just make it an open public meeting in case enough council members attend. Again, not required, but attendance is greatly encouraged by the state.
Okay,
1 o'clock, 7:10.
Yep, 1 o'clock.
thank you. And then Mr. Weathers.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. All I have as far as the staff report is just a couple of dates and times for some upcoming events. And I'll have plenty of words to share with you throughout the agenda. So Wednesday, March 27th at 6:30 p.m. is the next weekly community or the next Gray Fire community meeting at the Medical Lake High School auditorium. We also have a planning commission meeting between now and the next time we'll meet together. That is on March 28th at 5:30 p.m. And then the Kiwanis Easter egg hunt is on the 30th, Saturday, the 30th of March at Waterfront Park at 11 a.m. And that's all I have for you at this time.
Thank you, sir. And those things, those last few things are in the newsletter too, for reference. Workshop discussion. We have a historic preservation, an interlocal agreement, Spokane County. That was resolution 24655. We were expecting Logan from the county maybe to be here. I see he's not present. But go ahead, Sonny, and let's have some discussion about that.
Anyway, Logan expresses his condolences for not being here. His wife's birthday dinner is tonight, and I said, you know what, that's fine. We've got this workshop discussion, so anything that you have that I can't answer, I will bring to Logan's attention, and we'll make sure that before we bring a resolution for your action, that we'll address those concerns for you. A new local business owner who's renovating her building was seeking to add it to historic register and pursue related benefits. And this led to Logan from the Spokane City County Historic Preservation Office giving a presentation during our February 20th council meeting on the benefits of historic preservation and the process for Medical Lake to be served by the Historic Preservation Office at no cost. The requirements to do so is that the city must pass a historic preservation ordinance, which we have a first read scheduled for later on tonight's agenda, and then also sign on to an interlocal agreement with Spokane County and the Historic Preservation Office. So this workshop discussion is to explore the interlocal agreement prior to bringing a resolution for action. And what I've is on page 3, starting on page 3 of your packets, goes through the language. And what I would like to bring to your attention on the front end is that we had our legal counsel review this interlocal agreement, and they shared a concern related to item 5C, which is on page 5. And the concern was that there's a litigation defense obligation of the city in the event of claims against the county. And so they thought, well, that's different, and we wanted to explore that. So they also asked that we make sure that our insurance pool is okay with that language. So I did share this interlocal agreement with them. They reviewed and shared the concerns, stating they're not amenable to the county making any decisions on their covered claim handling. And so we reached out to Logan to share, who has been out of town for the the last week, and so today he was catching up, so I didn't get a chance to get all the answers. But he's aware of the concern. He shared it with their legal counsel. They are stating that it's just a common indemnification clause that they have utilized, pretty standard for the county. The city has shared some as well, but we'll have a further discussion on that. And they were open to having language that is more amenable to WCIA and the city as well. So that is the only special circumstance that I have to share with you, but happy to address any questions or comments that you may have related to this interlocal agreement.
Well, on page 3 in the first one, it says the city, blah, 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 county having a dealing with us with a population less than 5,000, well, which is us. So what happens if our population goes over 5,000?
Correct. So that would require a potential change, but they had mentioned that what they use for population is census data, which won't be updated for another until 2030. So at this point, the under 5,000 we would qualify for until the next.
Okay. So also on that page, we're making this agreement with the county, but it says the county can provide these services so long as they have an agreement in place with the city of Spokane. So whose office is this? Is it the city of Spokane's or is it the county's?
It is a joint office between the county and city of Spokane. And so they have an agreement as well, which provides for the Historic Preservation Office. And so as long as that agreement's in place, they can offer those services to us. We did actually we had made some changes thinking that that should reflect Medical Lake and the county. And we learned that, no, it's a complicated web of relationships that provides for these services, but great question.
Yeah, the funding and the office space and the funding and how staff get paid is all shared between the county and the city of Spokane.
And then on the page 4 on city's responsibilities, it says that the Spokane Historic Landmarks Commission shall have the authority to designate and protect landmarks within the city, which within us. So I'm thinking, can they do this on their own authority? Does the owner have any say in this?
So, and what that would speak to is the ordinance that we'll address later in tonight's agenda, which we're seeking to approve by adoption, or is that right?
We're adopting their.
Adopt by reference, thank you. We're going to adopt by reference the county code, which spells out that it is the owner who pursues that designation. So they would not do that apart from the owners.
So I'm guessing, right in here, there's a main reason that somebody want to do this is there's a tax break.
That is one of the benefits that can come.
10-year tax break.
And it's I believe it's a tax deferral.
They have to make $25,000 worth of improvements to the historical property, and then they, in return, are given a reduction in their taxes for some period of time.
Or the prudent, the owner on this would probably sell it right before that 10 years is up. So whoever gets the property afterwards has their taxes go up.
It's possible.
Well, also in the next one, it had services top. Will be provided case to case basis determined by the CEO. Who's the CEO? On the top, the first paragraph on page 5.
National Executive Officer. Let's see. Is that of the Historic Preservation CEO?
I would guess, because this is the parties, and I believe Spokane County and the city of Medical Lake are defined as the parties. So I would guess that that's the.
I looked around through everything else and I never did see a definition of.
Down below in section 4, it says county CEO. So it refers to CEO again. But says
Yeah,
county CEO.
yeah. Well, who's the county CEO?
We could get that, but either county, get the title corrected, so it's clear. That'd be helpful. I had one thought on page 6 at the top, where we're talking about the indemnification. At the bottom of 5, loss or damages brought against the county, the city shall defend the same as its sole cost and expense. At minimum, it would be shared cost and expense. They're acting on our behalf, but they're still the actors, and I get it's for our, we're in this together now, so maybe shared
Yeah.
cost.
And the final judgment is rendered against the county and if officers or agents, the city shall satisfy the same.
Yeah.
So we get to pay for all
I
of
think
it.
that at minimum, we'd want to have shared responsibility, but hold each other, indemnify each other, of course, but if we were sued by somebody else, then share that responsibility.
Yeah, and to the $5,000, I mean, even, or sorry, 5,000 people. Because I asked while he was here, and he said, well, he talked to Commissioner French about it, and it was kind of like a trust me, bro. Gentleman's agreement that they would cover it even if we went over the 5,000. And I know he's up for reelection.
Well, he did do it, he did use that kind of language, but then Sonny and I later
Okay.
clarified that where is the standard? It's based on the census.
Right, but because I was asking, well, what happens when we go over the 5,000?
That was-
Saying,
In 10 years
does,
from
right?
now, so what would happen when we go over the 5,000, we look at this and say, oh, they can charge us, we could renegotiate the contract, we can start our own historical preservation. So
right, and then it's that domino effect, if we assume all of the new language and you make a city code that says we're going to do it,
right.
then if they no longer want to pay for it because we're 5,001,
Mhm.
then we have to satisfy our own city code that says we have to have the 11 people and we have to have
We would.
permanent staff.
We would have to we'd have to expand our ordinance to say something more than just adopting the county.
Right,
So there would be a negotiation, a conversation that's going to come before council. That decision is going to be made by council. And there's 2 things that can happen, well, 3. We do nothing and say we're not going to do it anymore. 2, we can negotiate with the city and the county to pay them something for the service to continue doing the service, or we take it on ourselves, adopt, our own ordinance and develop our own historic preservation.
right. Well, I was just looking at the implication, like if we decide to do nothing. And if we have residents that are in the middle of a 10-year deferment for their taxes,
Mhm.
does it disqualify them from the rest of their deferment? Because
I wouldn't think so,
I
because it's.
wouldn't think so either, but I just don't know if we decide to do nothing and let our part of the historical opt-in go away,
I
does
don't
it mean
think
that new people can't join?
I don't think anything with the tax deferment, we can clarify this, but the tax deferment, once it's awarded, it's done, it's set in motion, nobody goes back and you don't walk it back, you qualify for that period, that's over. Anybody new coming in, anyone that would have to request, they couldn't request until we can say, no, we're not doing it, so we're not taking any more requests. To, yep, we're in the negotiation with the county, as soon as we decide to pay them X dollars, then we'll let you know, you can reapply, or we're gonna stand up our own. Now we're feeling like we're big and strong enough to do it ourselves. And as soon as we have that stood up, you could apply with us.
Okay.
I think that's,
Yeah, and to clarify with the code language, what we're bringing forward to council for consideration is adopting by reference the county code as it is and as they amend it, so that if they change it, we don't have to go back and re-amend anything, because we're just adopting by reference. So if in that case we change down the road, it's as easy as striking that adoption by
We could
reference.
just cut it out.
Yep, and then if we choose to do something on our own, we can define what those terms and language look like, so yeah, at that time.
Mr. Pritchard.
I didn't see anything in there about how to, and I'm not a lawyer, it's not that smart. If somebody buys a house that's already listed and they wanted to get out of it, because I mean, there is more cost to it. It's a cool thing, but at the same time, it's more expensive to have to put in certain use of windows and things like that, and you're up for violations. How can somebody get out of it?
I think it's
Is it a renewal?
isn't it?
Is it, I think once you're on the registry, you stay there, I guess you could request to come off of it. I don't know, I didn't read the entire code.
Yeah, till the house falls down.
until the house falls down, you're forever on the historical registry. Yeah.
That is-
You
I
can't
can
let
see that
fall
being a
down.
potential liability.
That's part of the thing. You can't let fall down.
Earthquake.
So if you say you can't fix up your house that you bought, I guess you should have known, but.
I
I'm
don't
saying
think that's in, I don't,
You can't get. so,
you're limited probably on what you can
Yes.
change to
That's
the
what-
exterior.
Well, I know, I mean, I'd like to think that people would look before too, but there's potential that they have. Somebody buys a house, decides they want to. fix it.
That's a question that we can bring to Logan. I'm sure they answer that often and. Once you're in, is it like Hotel California, you can never get.
Yes, preserved, yeah.
I do believe that once you start, because that's what Logan, what I didn't know, always in real estate, people complained about being on the historic. Because they couldn't make changes that they wanted to, they couldn't do stuff, but then he said that, you know, the people have to apply for it. But I know when people try to get out of it, you can't get out of it. That's my understanding.
Seems like.
So.
That is a
know
good
before you buy.
question.
Yeah.
It's know before you buy. No owner wants it on there.
It's like an HOA.
They have to
Well,
consider
everybody
that.
else just had to prove somebody to build like on the wetland, right, because. They could get to a larger.
Right.
And say I have to build my property, right?
That's something the person who requests, that's why the person has to request to be on it. The county doesn't drive around and say, yeah, it's you. So they have to ask for it and they have to know that they may be at risk of having a hard time selling if they ever wanted to sell. I mean, it could be a challenge, right?
I'm assuming the property tax reduction is significant.
It's the taxes on the value of the renovation. So if you spend $25,000 in renovation, you get to defer taxes on $25,000 of your property.
Or whatever the assessed value, the new assessed value is or something. But, yeah.
And overall,
I don't get
I look at this whole thing as. I'm generally against adding regulations and requirements. It seems like
Remember
we
though,
have to deal with so many stuff, citizens have to deal with so many regulations now. That you just have a general feeling against adding more. Yes, this benefits one person so far, right? Because we have one
But
person
and
who wants to do
only,
this.
only if one person wants to do it, but if other people want their home on the historic registry, let's say if they're gonna make it an Airbnb.
Yeah.
They want it on the historic registry, they're gonna, remodel that. What if somebody bought the castle and wanted to turn it into a really cool place and put it on the historical registry? People want to do that, but not everybody. But they can't do it unless we have a mechanism and the county won't recognize that. They're in the city has to have an ordinance. County's offering to do it for free. And yes, we've only had one person ask. It's not ours, I guess, to decide why somebody would want or not want that, but just my thoughts.
I think that's a good point, but at the same time, like I think our mission here as a city is to enjoy our history and pretty cool
Yeah.
history. And bringing them in, will bring in more photographs and more research area. I think, it sounds like what they do.
One of the other things that can be important too is, so like all of the historical buildings up on state property. You can give pause to the demolition of buildings if they have historical significance. And so you can stop and do a save the theater or whatever, and raise that issue because, and that is a state law that any building is owned by the state, but this would just sort of bolster that too, that if, and we do have a interest in a project to preserve the theater up at Eastern State Hospital. And so there's some grant money that started to roll on that, but
It seems like significant buildings though could be preserved, whether they're designated historic or not.
it's true. And they don't have
Depends on
to.
the owner, so.
But they'll generally be more expensive to rehabilitate if they're on there. Like, we have a lot of money to buy stuff, but never to keep it up.
So whatever your investment is, you get that amount tax deferred. That's what it was. It wasn't 25,000. It was
25%.
25%.
25%.
Yeah,
That's
so
a structure
I was
value.
like, it had something.
Yeah, you gotta rehab must equal to at least 25% of the assessed value.
Mhm.
And then whatever you spend is deferred, starting
Right.
2 years
It's
after
both.
you complete.
I think everything's gonna be here before we know it,
I know, right?
6 years.
And they do have some small programs like matching grants for facade improvement, some other stuff like that, but.
I appreciate all those thoughts. They're good. Any other thoughts or comments we want to think about at the workshop, or questions that we can have brought back?
Just on page 6, termination, it says either party may terminate this agreement for any reason whatsoever upon 45 days written notice from one party to the other.
But you're still on the registry.
Right, and that's between the city and the county for this agreement, but
For the
yeah,
work.
which is separate from if somebody applies to get on that registry, they're gonna be. And there is language in the ordinance talking about certificate of appropriateness, right? So if somebody wants to get off, they can pursue that, but it has to go through the building inspector to be able to qualify. So I believe there's a process, but I'll let the expert share that.
I think a perfect example would be a wildfire came through and it burned down. And you're gonna rebuild. It's no longer. Unless, so you think about what, that's gonna be a new process. Okay,
Well, we'll bring those inputs and concerns. We'll get those addressed and
okay.
appreciate it.
Get that on a future agenda then. Any reason why we couldn't bring this forward as a resolution at the next meeting, or do we need further discussion? What's the general consensus?
I would think as long as legal is happy with the liability issues.
And we'll get a couple of those questions answered in relation to the indemnification provision. I don't doubt that it's something that they typically use, and perhaps we're just reading it a little awkwardly, but we'll talk to them and get our concerns assuaged and go from there.
Well,
Listen, where,
Isn't there only one other city that's part of this besides the county?
yeah, I think it's Fairfield, if I
Yeah.
remember
Mhm.
Logan.
Other cities have their own, like Cheney's had their own historical preservation for decades, that lake has their own, so. Okay, all right, we'll look for that, and then that resolution to come on the next council agenda, with those questions answered. Thank you so much. Council for taking the time, and staff too. Action items on the consent agenda: approval of the March 5th, 2024 minutes, which were sent electronically and added tonight. Any additions or changes? Otherwise, I entertain a motion to accept minutes as.
Move to accept.
Thank you.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. I'll make one note, that because we've continued to get significant written attachments to our agenda, we'll no longer be attaching those in our packets, where we'll get like these 50 extra pages or 20 extra pages, because one, it becomes confusing to the public. 5 years down the road, they look back and it looks like city documents. So those won't be attached as part of the official minutes, but they are preserved as a public record, and anybody can ask to have those. And they'll be referenced in the minutes, so that we had this many pages of an attachment for this purpose, and they can be accessed by public records request. So I think that will save a few trees as well. Approval of March 19, 2024 payroll claims and warrants numbered 51105 through 51112, and payable warrants numbered 30091 through 30101 in the amount of $156,079.23, and claim warrants numbered 51113 through 51146 in the amount of $183,688.74.
Move to approve.
Thank you.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. Resolutions 24 656, the Cascade Agreement. Boss, Sunny, whoever would like to lead that, thank you.
Let's talk on Steve's behalf.
Thank you.
We did workshop this last meeting, and essentially what this is actually a contract that benefits us primarily. It's securing Cascade as a vendor and the supply that they provide for materials to the wastewater treatment plant, which is something that is greatly beneficial to Steve and his operations. And I do apologize, the material itself is, I'm spacing the polymer. Thank you.
That custom polymer one.
That's exactly it, yeah. And so having it on a schedule and readily available greatly increases the timing of acquiring it and not having to have lead time and then produce it and we'll know it's coming. So it helps him greatly.
Thank
Any
you.
other
Any
questions?
questions about this contract?
Just move to approve.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Any discussion? Motion passes unanimously. Second resolution is 24663, DOE groundwater study grant agreement amendment. This is for record keeping purposes. Cost, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, so the primary reason this came up was we were having issues with DOE and the submission for reimbursement of expenditures that came from Eastern Washington University. Essentially, there were some conflicting rules and regulations that that DOE was imposing versus our grant agreement. So they were saying that these expenditures, which were related to the project, and they were saying that they didn't quite fall into the grant agreement. And then so when it fell back on their regulations on how they approve expenditures, it didn't fall into those as well. So we kind of ran into this stalemate. But these amendments were suggested by the Department of Ecology and they're happy with them. And it broadens the scope from which expenditures we can put through in order to make this project happen.
Worthwhile project for sure. Any questions for us about the agreement?
Move to approve.
Second.
Thank
All
you.
in favor? Any
One abstention.
abstain? Mr. Pritchard abstains. All the rest of the one. Resolution 24665, the Commerce Climate Planning Grant. This where we did add that signature page, so that's perfected there. Sonny, you want to speak to that?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. Commerce Climate Planning Grant Agreement, as addressed in the workshop during the March 5th council meeting, legislation passed and signed into law in 2023, known as House Bill 1181. Adds a climate goal to the Growth Management Act and requires local comprehensive plans to have a climate element with resilience and greenhouse gas emissions mitigation sub-elements included. The resilience sub-element must include goals and policies to improve climate preparedness, response, and recovery efforts, of which we've learned quite a bit this past year. It's mandatory for all counties and cities that are fully planning under the Growth Management Act, and we are a fully planning city under that. The city applied for a $100,000 grant with the intent of creating a hazard mitigation plan and a communications plan that will inform the climate resilience goals and policies to be adopted in our 2026 comprehensive plan periodic update. And so that grant agreement is in front of you and we recommend approval. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. It's on page 27 of your packets.
Page
Mhm.
44. No? Oh,
44 is the signature
The signature
page.
page.
The grant
27.
agreement starts on page 27.
And then the agreement starts on 29. Yeah.
So, and this is the grant we've already applied for?
Yes, we did apply for it. So with that House bill, there was funding made available to help planning agencies to carry forward and incorporate that work. So,
So, okay, so this is from a grant from Department of Commerce?
yes.
Yeah. And this will afford us the hazard mitigation plan and the resiliency plan. think of the post-fire mitigation and other things. And so, well, it has the word climate planning. It's really talking about the impacts of.
Likely related.
And our intent with applying for the grant was that we could have some takeaways of actual implementable plans versus hiring a consultant to do the work and tell us what ought to be. Having gone through the Gray Road fire, recognizing that there's a tremendous amount of opportunities that we're a little shy in being prepared for. We felt it prudent to say, well, we would really like to have far more information and preparation in place and plans in place prior to the potential disasters that we could face. And so having an implementable hazard mitigation plan, which wouldn't change our connection with the county and their hazard mitigation plan as well, but it would just better define it for our specific needs to the city of Medical Lake and our partners. And the communications plan is another piece of that. In the midst of crisis, we've learned that communication is a challenge. If you don't know who to call before it happens, it's only going to complicate things. So being able to message appropriately, have the right contacts identified prior to a disaster so that when it strikes, we can just pick up a book and move without having to figure out what step to take next.
This was,
So, out of curiosity, in that House bill, how much money was put up available for cities to apply for?
It was a lot. I don't know exactly, but yeah, we, as a smaller city, we qualified for the 100,000. I think larger entities can qualify for quite a bit more.
Because I know from my personal perspective, it's nice that we have this money coming in, we have a grant. But I have sometimes find difficulty with the legislature that doles out the money, because it's our money. It's an excuse for taxing and spending to me, but, and I'm not a fan of the Growth Management Act either, so, but it's nice that we get that money for a small city, because we wouldn't have it otherwise, but in the overall big scheme of things, I'm not a fan of it, so.
all right. Yes, sir.
And then has this become part of the comprehensive plan as well?
So what our intent is that we would have these implementable plans in hand, and we would take the information from them and incorporate that into our comprehensive plan updates. So those required elements would be included. But instead of just having words to put into our comprehensive plan, we'd have implementable plans in hand, and we could glean from that to, yes. So it's a two birds, one stone approach that we felt would get us the greatest value for the dollars coming in.
I know I received a lot of emails and texts during the whole fire and I had no idea, so I would appreciate that.
Yeah.
Communication would be awesome. But you guys did a great job.
Well, we managed, but we didn't have a playbook. And so this will give us a playbook. And that'll also give us a playbook that we can share with other small cities. And that's so valuable. So if we can get that ready and then help them get their plan in place.
And then is this just gonna be reported back to the planning commission? I see a lot of report to planning commission. Is that the plan?
So the plan, yes, our planning commission would manage a lot of these discussions and the outreach, the public outreach and but yeah, it would, Elisa, our planner, would essentially manage these plans as they come around. And we do have a request for proposal out right now for the hazard mitigation plan. And we're hearing some interest from some consulting agencies to help facilitate those conversations with our partners so that we can have a good outcome. But our planning commission will help host those conversations.
I will move to accept this grant.
All in favor?
I
Any opposed?
Yes.
One of them passes 6-1. Resolution 24-667, bid award for the Jefferson Water Main Project. Giving award to Colville Construction, page 45.
So good evening again, Mayor and Council. I'll speak on behalf of Public Works Director Scott Duncan, who is celebrating 30 years of wedded bliss with his wife. So That's why he's not sharing with you. Otherwise it would be him. But want to let you know that we added the page on what we were waiting on for the resolution into the document. So what we're waiting on was I didn't have the date for when the county awarded us this ARPA funding for the project. So I needed that for the resolution document, but I did find it. So we got that included. We had 8 bids that were opened on March 14th for this project, which has been well vetted and it's much needed. It's replacing the water main along Jefferson, which has a lot of leaded joints. And so we're really and has a lot of repairs required that cost the city a lot of money. So we had 8 bids that responded. 7 of those bids were responsive. Not fully responsive. One of the bids, which actually was the lowest bid, did not meet all the requirements of the bid documents. And so it was eliminated from the selection. And of the 7 remaining bids, the lowest bidder was Colville Construction. The recommendation from our city engineer is in the packet for your review as well. And what we would love to do is award this bid to Colville Construction based on your approval.
Move to accept.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Any discussion? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Moving on then to public hearings, there are none. Ordinance 10A, first read on historic preservation, ordinance 1122. As we talked about, if you look at page 51, our ordinance, it's simply adopting by reference in Spokane County. And then you'll find attached, starting on page 53, chapter 240 of the county's historic preservation. So this is what we are adopting if this passes. This is the first read.
So I'll confess that 2.40 is what would be reflected in Medical Lake Municipal Code. It's chapter 1.48 of county's code. But originally, when we were first having this conversation, it was what code language would we want to do? So we started with the county's code and we said, well, how can we align with the county's code but write our own? And so this is the county's code. It just has Medical Lake's name in there because we were looking at how we could make our code align with the county's. But looking at precedents similar to the agreement we have with scraps that we've recently discussed, in order to comply with the scraps requirement to have code that's similar to the county's, we adopted the county's code by reference. And so with that precedence and with some discussion, we determined that a good course of action in this event would be to simply adopt the county's code by reference for historic preservation. So the language of that code is what you find starting on page 53. It's just labeled as if it were, if what we're proposing tonight is not to adopt all this, if we're adopting this language by reference, but this would not become what Medical Lake's municipal code would read. Medical Lake's municipal code would simply read chapter 2.40 historic preservation, adopting
County.
yeah.
All of those.
Adopted by reference, chapter 1.48 of the Spokane County Code Historic Preservation as currently enacted or hereafter amended, hereby adopted by reference as fully set forth therein.
Mr. King, were we supposed to put this on the record as an ordinance? Since it's the first read of the ordinance, I think we bypassed that reading of the ordinance.
Yes, and there's a few different ways we could go about this.
Okay.
Understanding we have some questions about the interlocal agreement that still need
Yeah.
to be answered. This could certainly be tabled until those are answered and maybe do everything at once, so to speak, with the
sure.
interlocal agreement and this. But of course, if there's an appetite just to pass it to the second read pending answers
Gotcha.
to some of those ILF questions, we
Okay,
can do it that way.
because we
as well.
might continue this, okay. One thing I would suggest is that we just remove the entire because it's confusing. We have to keep explaining what it is that's attached here. I'll just remove this completely. And that was my own thought anyway. unless we're going to attach the actual Spokane County 1.48 as it's written with the county, we can do that as a reference if we want, but I think that if we should remove that altogether, it's confusing, but other thoughts then on discussion on the first read?
Well, my only thought was when I was reading through there, the membership of the Historic Landmark Commission, 11 total members. It just seemed a lot. I'm thinking that a lot of our stuff around here, we have trouble getting people to serve, and I figured 11 was a bit excessive. But,
That's the counties, and I think that that's set by
you know,
their own, that's set by their ordinance. or
So that's
say
the
it,
county.
yeah.
county commission, no, but wouldn't we have our own separate?
No, our intent would be to sign an interlocal agreement to utilize the Landmarks Commission they already have set in place. So we would not need to replicate that. We would simply become a part of that
Yeah.
and
So
govern.
that's what that ILA was talking about, that we join their forces. They have all of this staff. They provide all of that support.
And then he did say that we would have the ability to, when there's a vacancy in their existing commission, to apply for some of these.
Because it says these 11 members are designated by the mayor.
Yeah, but I think if we completely remove the 2.40 language, like Mayor Cooper is suggesting, there won't be that confusion.
Correct. So again, and I apologize, this was just the reference of as if we were going to write this code for the city of Medical Lake. That's what it would look like, but it is the language of the county. We've just made it look like Medical Lake in this version. But it's in here simply as a reference of what the county's code reads like.
Right. Any other thoughts or concerns about that?
I personally would like to see it cleaned up. If we have to table it and bring it back, do it all at once, get the questions.
Yeah.
Answered and do it one time versus removing stuff, getting questions answered,
Mhm.
first reading. I personally don't enjoy doing it things like.
I agree. Is that a motion then to
Right.
continue the first read to the next meeting where we can get corrections and
So moved.
Second,
all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed to that? Okay. First read and then we
If
continue.
I may, just procedurally, the interlocal agreement cannot be agreed to without the ordinance in place. So that's fine. We'll bring back the ordinance. For
I think we
first
can
read.
have the whole discussion again. Sure, yeah. So it sounds like that's the will of the council. But thank you so much. And then we have the first read of ordinance 1123, the right of way permit and use requirements covered.
So
You
as-
have the definitions there, so page 65. Hudson?
So during the public rights of way permit use and requirements workshop discussion at the March 5th council meeting, draft language was reviewed that is now before you for consideration. Want to speak to a few of the items that were provided as inputs. One was Councilmember Spears' concern related to, for instance, Avista and the number of scenarios. So upon further discussion with legal counsel on page 68, that second paragraph stating about franchise agreements, city council reserves the right through franchise agreement to modify, waive, or establish new or different conditions related to construction activities. So those franchise agreements do dictate scenarios in those larger senses where that activity is going to happen. And so it would qualify, those particular scenarios would be qualified under the franchise agreements and not necessarily this would more dictate the onesie twosie scenarios that aren't under franchise agreements.
who currently has franchise agreements other than Avista?
Davis Communications, CenturyTel, Fat Beam, Yeah, and we're exploring some with Ziply Fiber and Comcast. Similarly, you had Councilmember Pritchard had brought forward a concern around exemptions. I've got some backup here if I get out of line. But essentially discussing that, we do have prepared some language if we so desired to add exemption language in here. The challenge or the concern around adding exemption is that what we're dealing with largely in this is some big companies who would be who have deep pockets and large legal firms who could certainly look to get out of everything that we would want to bind them to in this language, but it is a possibility and we do have prepared. Sean, do you have anything more you want to say?
Not a whole lot. And Councilman Pritchard, I guess if you wanted to hear some proposed language, it would not be some voluminous addition to the ordinance whatsoever. And I'm happy to read that if council is interested, but like Sonny was saying, a clause like this and this type of agreement and ordinance could be exploited theoretically by some of these larger companies if they see an open avenue to have the council exercise discretion for whatever work is issued in the right of way. So there's pros and cons.
Yeah, so and then I was just, my concern is we have very, very wide right of ways here, and if you don't upkeep that property, it's basically, and then trying to dig those out or build some sort of structure to make it look prettier is now.
Yeah, I think the protection that we have, if you have a very firm ordinance, and then you, on top of that, you have your agreement. It's within the agreement is where you have all your negotiations and variances and exceptions would be in the agreement itself. And, because that this says, so this sets the standard for how franchise agreements work. And then you have the actual agreement with the company, and that's where those, you know.
I think both of our concerns were with individual citizens, like doing work in front of their own home.
And I think
in the
that
right
is,
way.
that is addressed. We talked about that earlier today. Let me find-
Well, I mean, that really, we do want to know what's happening in the right of way with those
Well-
individuals without, if there's, if it's people doing what they
Right.
want to do
My-
in the right of way and the city has no knowledge, then when the city does come through with a project, now there's the
Right.
concern
My
over, I
Big
made this
beef was under purpose on D, it says any other development activity in the right of way. And so in the definitions, we don't define a development activity. So construction activities include, but are not limited to the following, which is a bunch of utility stuff, and I understand all of that. But then D, any other development activity in the right of way, including utility work and city health easements. To me, that brings back I'm gonna call it the blueberry argument. If you're gonna put in a raised planter in your front easement, so my easement is up to 15 feet in front of my house. So I have, my father planted lilac bushes there. We have small trees. I'm scraping 5 inches of topsoil so that I could put a gravel driveway or gravel walkway out to the road. Because right now I don't have any way for my son's friends to approach my front door. Because it's just grass. And I'd like to have them not track it in the house. Does that fall under any other development activity? Because to me it does. And when I'm worried that this is, can I put in edging, up at the street, right? I know people put in sprinkler systems, people do all of those things. And a lot of, existing utility codes make it so that you don't run into, when you're putting in sprinklers, you should call 811, right? But a lot of people don't, but our utilities are 36, 48 inches down below so that we don't interfere with that. So I think if this is passed, then the city would have the ability to tell everybody that they can't do anything without getting an undisclosed amount. We haven't set a value yet, permit. And down in, where is it? Where is the $2 million liability policy? in the bonding area. Bond. No, right above, evidence of insurance. The permittee shall furnish the city satisfactory evidence for a $1 million per occurrence or $2 million general aggregate policy for the city. So does that include individual homeowners that are doing improvements to their front lawn? Because to me, as it reads, it does. So when I go to redo my driveway because it's gravel and I get it paved, and I want to do it myself, or if I want to bring in gravel and do it myself, do I need to provide the city with a $2 million general aggregate insurance policy?
So in the application process, it would be pretty clearly identified that your work isn't gonna pose that amount of threat. But again, it's one of those scenarios where is a permit, what does that permit need to accomplish? If the city doesn't have an ability to review that, and it's just what it's what it is.
Yeah,
then
if this
we
just
end up
says,
with a scenario like we have recently where work does come through, streets get widened, and then there's a host of issues with those sprinklers.
I understand that.
And sometimes as well, where historically we've had issues where access to easements for sewer cleanouts and are no longer available to
Yeah,
the city, and it puts us at risk.
I mean, I don't know. I would like to see some sort of either like not an exception, because I don't want to go down that road, but a small works caveat or carve out for, if I do electrical work in my own home as a homeowner, I can pull a homeowner's permit. I still have to go up to code, but I don't have to have licensing and bonding and all of that the city or the county dictates that I do as a contractor. This right here says the permittee shall furnish the city. Like they have to. As a condition of this permit, they have to have a bond. Before a permit is issued, the applicant must deposit with the city a surety bond in the amount of 1.5 times the estimated cost of the construction activity. So yes, that is scamming. So, but if I'm going to bring in $1,000 worth of gravel, do I have to bring you guys down a $1,500 deposit in cash, get my gravel set, and then Scott can come back and give me a check? I think it's putting an undue burden on the individual homeowner. I understand how if you're a company, if you're a utility, then that's fine too. But then also as a small business owner, if I'm having to do that service drop for a customer, by customer calls and they want to do a panel change, and Avista comes and cuts the overhead line, and I have to extend it, then is that going to fall, since I'm driving across the easement and since the overhead lines are going across the easement, is that going to go under Avista's interagency agreement? Franchise agreement, yes. I think it's for the intended target, it's really good, but I think the people that are going to fall underneath the targets. So there is a lot of good language. No construction activities shall be performed by the provider of utility or service until a franchise agreement has been executed by the city. Great. But it also does not have a carve out for individual citizens. And maybe if it's an individual property owner and they want to do something like that, I would be more than happy to pay a $50 permit fee and have Scott or some other designatee come down and me have a set of drawings and say, this is what I want to do. And if they deem that it's no threat, great.
Isn't that part of the application process though? Because it says you come with drawings and all that. So if they decide you don't need a permit, then they know about the work.
Yeah.
But it doesn't say that you don't have to get a
Doesn't say.
permit if they say you don't need a permit.
Oh, plant a blueberry, I could die in time.
Right.
You see under the permit fee too, that the right of way permit fee shall be established by resolution of the city council.
That
The
would be a
fees
fee schedule.
themselves could be,
We would add that to the.
there would
fee
be
schedule
low,
that we approved,
right, but
Yeah.
it's not gonna be just one fee. I mean, it's gonna, you could put in layers of fee there.
No,
And maybe, and I agree with you that I hear what you're saying. You're saying that you think that these small scale projects done by homeowners or even with a contractor that's done on private property by a single homeowner, you're wanting an exception for that because the $1 million and all of some of these
Yeah.
requirements are excessive.
I don't even want an exception. I just want a slightly smaller set of rules for that. Because I think the $2 million insurance policy to hold the city not liable for me to do work on my own property. I mean, that's excessive.
There's language says city may reduce insurance limits if good cause exists. In that same section.
The last sentence, the city may reduce the insurance limits if good cause exists, but such good cause does not create or require any obligation on the part of the city for such a reduction. That's kind of
It's,
what would trigger a reduction? Maybe you should,
yeah,
I mean, I hear what you're saying, what does that look like in reality?
right. Say you may, and then is there any limits? Can we reduce to 0? I just think that I think that's just a blind spot in this is the individual homeowner.
And what I would offer similarly to that is the rules and policy section to implement. We can adopt policies. Maybe that's where this fits better than the general rule. The exceptions and the specifications that take a little bit more detail versus trying to spell that out in code language. We get the right umbrella and we spell out in the policies where we can create those differences, just a suggestion.
It's true, we do all adopted policies shall be approved by city council. And I think that would be great to have policy. Policies or procedures, but I think the policy would be under this code, the policy for commercial work, residential work, and that we could then scale that back and also have the appropriate fee. I think you raise a good point, a valid point.
I would move to table this ordinance also until language is changed to match our comfort level.
Seconds.
All in favor?
I,
Any opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously that we will table this to come back. I would suggest if this isn't going to be modified, that you bring the policy then that would describe to satisfy the council's concern.
Yeah, that's fine.
So that will be tabled to a future meeting, depending on staff's ability to have that ready. So we'll see it on a future agenda. Thank you for your thorough attention to that. There is no executive session, no emergency ordinance. Any upcoming agenda items that we would want to add at this time? If not, you can pass that on to city administrator, Mr. Weathers. Interested citizen comments. Anyone in the room who has a citizen comment or online?
Yes, citizens, do I go down?
Oh, citizen. No, you can just speak from there. Mr.
Okay.
Director, go right ahead.
First sunny day, Saturday, my kiddos, we were walking, I make my kids run because I'm a horrible father. They tell me that all the time. Running through North Park, cars, this is not the first time it's happened, just peeling right through that. We have taken a whole grassy area there. They had a beautiful picnic bench in a area where families would often have picnic tables. It's now a parking lot. The city came in and poured gravel all over that. It's just, as far as I can tell, it's against the shoreline code, the permit there. People park everywhere. You see them on the trail, across the whole pathway. I mean, it's a war zone there, and there's just potholes that are huge. You can't figure out where the trail is. And I would really appreciate it if the city could just put some no parking, just take some blocks, put them across. I mean, it's gonna take a couple hours. I'm sorry, and probably some diesel or whatever. But then just put a no parking sign. Just give the people some
I think we have a plan Mr. Horton, do you want to come up and talk about that? We just looked at that on the map today and have a good plan to get some controls and beautify that just a little bit in the interim. So since you brought it up and I think we have a ready answer, that would be.
Yeah, so we looked into, so to go off, we don't want to do logs. There were logs there previously, from what Scott had said, and they just end up in the water. So we don't want to go that route, but we did reach out to Rock Placing Company today, and they came out and are giving us a bid on putting rocks that will
Large
separate. Yeah,
Boulder type rocks.
yes, yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
That are, there's currently some that kind of designated park, I think it's 2 or 3 parking spots right at the trailhead. So we'll continue off those rocks and put them along the entire pathway to the road. To help mitigate and show where the pathway is and where parking and driving is permitted.
I think that would be awesome.
In that area where the gravel was put in there, we'll be looking to put some grass back in there and make that nice, it's a couple benches, yeah.
When I first moved here, there's just always families picnicking there because it's usually
Yeah.
pretty quiet. And now because the park is closed, it's just crazy there.
Right.
Yeah. Which is nice.
So
Thank
we,
you very much.
yeah, just want you to know we're working on that and should get that resolved here pretty quick.
Next couple weeks.
Yeah, thank you so much, Glenn. It's nice when we have an answer to a problem.
Yes, I appreciate it.
Already working on it, so and thanks for letting us know about that early, appreciate it. If there's nothing further, then I'll entertain a motion to conclude.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any excluded? Thank you so much.